Alright everyone, so today I'm going to be engraving these knives. These throwing knives are pretty amazing. They're perfect point, and they were ordered from Amazon as a present for my birthday, and I've already used them a little bit, and they were very well balanced, and really I just enjoy throwing axes and knives. I've always wanted to get good at it. It's a really focused, I guess you could say, martial art, but it's the focus and the honing of skill is really what I'm interested in. I don't plan to really throw knives at anybody, but I do like getting good at throwing these things. It's a very relaxing thing for me, and the different tweaks and advancements in skill are something that's very attractive to me mentally. Anyway, I'm going to engrave these knives with an engraving pen that I've used on other things before in a couple other videos, but let's go ahead and get started. And also, while I'm doing this, I'm not going to be talking the whole time, but I will be making a comment here or there about war, speaking on war just in general, and the conflict that we as human beings bring upon ourselves. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a general idea of what I'm going to do with these knives, but you'll see in a little bit. But we'll go ahead and start. War is and seems integral to human nature. We as human beings put a lot of emphasis on our martial ability because, as tribes and as individuals, it was always necessary for us to be able to protect ourselves. This grew into an honor system to where it became honorable to fight for one's country, fight for one's family, and fight for one's own dignity and virtue. There are a number of ways that war has been used throughout human history. Those who start wars are the ones who usually say that, well, we're preemptively striking, or we were responding to an economic threat, or the people we're attacking are inferior and we deserve to conquer them because we're stronger. But there's always a reason in the minds of those who start a war. There's always this need for a reason to tell ourselves why this is okay, why we fight, and who we are in relation to the people that we're fighting. Everybody wants to believe that they're better for this or that reason, at least the vast majority of human beings. I know what I'm going to have to do. I actually have another engraver here, and I've been really trying to make this one last as much as possible, but the engraver that I got recently is the exact same one, but it's brand new, obviously, so it will do much better for what I'm trying to do, because the tip is new, the mechanisms within it are new, and hopefully it'll operate a little bit better on these knives, because I'm starting to find on this one that it's not the metal itself. Well, I don't really want the metal to give, but the paint in relation to the metal is not coming off as well as I had hoped. So let me go ahead and bust out this other one, see if we can get it to work for me a little bit better. But like I was saying about war, there are a few things about war that never really change. There's always that need to justify and say, okay, we're the right party in all this, or at the very least, this is how the world works: the strong conquer the weak. So I mean, if we're stronger, we should be able to. We should obviously deserve whatever the weak have. Oh yeah, that's much better. There's a couple other things that change, or that don't change, rather, in relation to war. We always try and put the war in a grander context in relation to the world. We always say, okay, our tribe needs dominance. We deserve dominance. We need to make our mark so that nobody else can threaten us. We need to find our place in the world. In order to do that, we have to conquer bigger parts of the world. We have to gain more resources. And we have to be as good a warriors as anybody else in the world. This is pretty constant throughout all human history. Making a name for your tribe, your country, your state, what have you. And, personal honor has been thrown into war quite a bit, but those are more duels, I guess you could say, when it comes down to personal, one-on-one honor. And we see those in just everyday fights and stuff like that. But, where does war really start? I think it starts in the hearts of individuals. It doesn't start as a collective. It starts with the turning of many individual hearts towards a single purpose. So war really starts within ourselves, not external to ourselves. So what does it mean to have a heart that craves conflict? I think most human hearts actually crave conflict to some degree, because there's a number of factors. There's this frustration with the world. It's not what we want it to be, so we crave to, kind of get back at it, whether it's through an individual, a family, a group that we consider as the enemy. Hell, even kids at school hating a kid from a different group. And it's funny how much even high school politics can describe the politics between nations. So we all have that frustration and that, to certain degrees, that desire to be cold or combative with others in society. But there are many of us who realize it and fight against that urge within, that we side with reason and decide to suppress that part of us, that frustration that wants to lash out at the world. I tried to do that myself, but it doesn't always work. But most of the time I find myself being able to make that work. And, sometimes when I say lash out because of frustration, it doesn't mean like hitting somebody. Sometimes it means being cruel to people in society, being a mean person, being completely obsessed with money and not the needs of others. There are many different ways that our frustration expresses itself. If we don't keep it in check. But when it comes down to it, it's our choice what we think. Now, there are many influences into basically forming how we think, but really, what it comes down to is our decision to allow these influences to influence us. and most people aren't aware of the decision, aren't aware that it's their fault. And it's to varying degrees people's fault. Somebody who has terrible influences, their parents are just terrible to them their whole lives, and then they end up to be a cruel person. I mean, they're the least at fault for something like that, but somebody whose parents are really nice and kind to them, but then they end up being a cruel person because they choose to be, that's another matter. But besides acting out, greed is obvious to most people, a very big factor in war as well. And it's why a lot of people go to war. They want to have a chance to satisfy that desire to conquer, to feel strong, and ultimately that insecurity that makes us want more money or want more things or be perceived as being tough or as being strong because either we're in the military or we take things while we're in the military. And I'm not talking about the United States government in particular. I mean, I'm just talking about soldiers throughout history, but even in modern times. But ultimately gaining something over somebody else by taking it from them or hoarding it yourself is greed. The want for things accompanied with the cruelty of not caring if others have things has been a terrible blight upon humanity for as long as we can remember. But yeah, war begins within our hearts. It takes the turning of many hearts to want to fight before war can be fought. And since this is the case, propaganda always precludes war. There's always a large amount of propaganda that is basically the vanguard of any war that takes place. And then, it's not, and there's a certain degree of responsibility for those who fall for propaganda. In the end, we allow ourselves to be convinced because we want to be convinced a lot of the time. So like when, let's use a very obvious example, when Hitler was making his bid for Europe, before he actually invaded Poland, there was a lot of propaganda about who was responsible and how the Allies in World War I had basically put too big of a burden onto Germany to pay them back, and that really those people were controlled by Jews and greedy capitalists. So Hitler was trying to convince the German people that their side had to act in order to prevent further robbery of Germany by inferior human beings and inferior ideologies, as far as what he was trying to tell people. That's what he told people anyway. So, but there was an element of the German populace who, something in their hearts, a lot of their hearts, not all of them, who wanted to be convinced. They wanted somebody to blame for the fines that were put on them after World War I. And as far as whether those fines or demands for payment were fair to Germany after World War I, I'm not quite sure. But when your currency is devalued and you can barely get food, you want to find an enemy to blame. And Hitler had the perfect story for anybody trying to convince themselves that it was somebody else's fault and that they should fight. Starting to look pretty good. I may just do one knife for this video, because otherwise I will be doing this for quite a while, and I'm sure some people will watch, but I don't want to put all of it on camera. There's no need for that. But let me say a few more things about war. Always observe before you allow your emotions to be fully invested in what you believe and what you consider to be the truth and what you find to be true based on the initial facts, because there are many reactions, emotional reactions that people found in their hearts based off of very little information and a lack of knowledge of what has actually just happened in any war. Well, before any war, when there's some kind of opening salvos or opening action that kind of begins a war. And our initial suppositions are hard to dislodge when they're emotionally charged, when we allow them to be emotionally charged in our hearts, just after we see something terrible or don't really know who to blame for something that has happened. And we want to lash out immediately. We want to fight. We want to bring justice to the world. But more often than not, we misjudge what justice needs to be done, what action needs to take place in response to this or that offense. And now, when war happens, there are some positive developments afterwards. I mean, there are not in every war, but in many wars, armies that were threatening a lot of people are destroyed. The people of this or that nation are secure and maybe free again, as far as war can bring freedom. But in most wars, the effects are illusory. We're told that this or that is better, but ultimately, everyone was going to come to the table to talk anyway. And it was a lot of wasted effort, wasted life, wasted effort, wasted time that we could have been advancing as a human race. But instead we were fighting, and it's a shame that so much of this fighting happens before people are willing to do what they're always going to have to do from the very beginning, which is sit down and talk. That's what we're always going to have to do from the beginning. But everybody wants to have a better hand to play with, to play from, I guess you could say. Everybody wants to reshuffle the deck enough times, take enough risks before they basically try and call somebody's bluff or raise what's at stake. And it seems like war a lot of the time is like a card game, some kind of sadistic card game in which people are chips to play with. And it breaks my heart to learn so much about human history and for so much of it to be pain and misunderstanding and hatred. But that's what a lot of human history is. It's war. We're getting better. I really believe that we're getting better. But I still don't know if we'll make it to a point before our planet starts to turn against us because of what we're doing to it, which is already happening, obviously. I mean, the temperature changes, the amount of hurricanes, the fires, all these things are because of our impact on the climate. And I hope that we can reach a point before we have to start figuring out what we're going to do as a human race to get off this planet or to make some very big changes that we should have made a long time ago. I hope we get to a point where we can start to actually work together on that instead of just focusing on ancient or recent grudges. So many of those wars throughout human history have indeed been religious. And these grudges just seem to last for no reason. No matter who's to blame, a grudge cuts both ways. It cuts the person who keeps that grudge just as much as it cuts a person who the grudge is against, if not more. A long time ago, I wanted to be a Marine. But years back, I realized that I can't take the meds that I take in the Marines or in the Army. And, all those years ago, when I think about it, I don't really know why I wanted to join the Army, the Marines rather, which is the Navy, but I don't really know why I wanted to. It seemed like something that people do. I mean, as stupid as that sounds. It seemed like a direction to my life that I felt was beneficial, like it would do something for me. But as far as like the reason, it's hard to really say. I thought it would be a great addition to my life, but I feel like a lot of people, I can't really say why I wanted to, because, that was years ago, but I can't really say why, because I don't really remember why I wanted to. But it wasn't because I wanted to kill people. It wasn't because I thought that these wars were just great. I think that a lot of people don't really think about why they join the military. They just kind of do it because, hey, yeah, let's go fight for our country. Why not? And I know that some wars do matter and should be fought, but I feel like most people in general join the military just because they want to be part of that group that is said to fight for our country, to protect the freedoms that we hold dear. And I don't think that the military always does that. And we're talking about in humanity, not just the United States, but I don't even think our military always necessarily does that. I think that somebody who joins because they do want to protect this country, that's a good reason for joining, don't get me wrong. But I don't feel like the wars that we get into are necessary all the time. So whether somebody wants to or not, if they do it join for that reason, then that makes them an honorable person. But I feel like there's a lot of deception on the part of the American government as far as what they tell soldiers, because I've known soldiers my best friend before he died, and we were teenagers, he had joined the Marines, not the Marines. He had joined the Army, and before he died, and then when he joined, it just seemed like something to do, because his mom had been there, and he felt like that was a good direction to take his life. And when he came back, he just seemed a lot more depressed. When he came back from basic and he was about to be, go on his first tour, it just seemed like a change had happened in him. A change as far as how happy he was in life, because he didn't seem to laugh as much. And maybe he started to realize what he'd gotten himself into. And he ended up dying. I don't really want to say how, but when he was about to go to his first tour, I don't think it didn't happen on purpose. It wasn't suicide, but he was a good guy. He was better than me, and I wasn't the best friend. We got into a lot of trouble throughout our high school years, and we were friends in middle school even. And hell, I'm 26 now, and he died, when I was in my, 18. I was 18, 19. But he changed quite a bit when he came back, and I've known other soldiers who I know a Marine that he was a very liberal person before he went in, and then when he went in and came back, he was extremely conservative. And I just thought, how did this change happen? It's not so much that I have anything against conservative people. It's just, I just wondered, how did this change happen? When did the service change what he believed? And, he joined the Marines, so I've heard even Marines call themselves jarheads. I don't know to what extent that's true. I really don't, because I haven't been in the Marines, but I feel that maybe militaries do influence us to such an extent that we literally become people that can be more easily directed by them, I suppose. Anyway, war is... There are many ways in which war changes as far as weapons and maybe tactics and machines, or planes, tanks, techniques with nuclear warheads as far as leverage to say, okay, we have these nukes, so we don't want you to have these nukes. And if you do have the weapons that we have, then there's a problem. Certain diplomatic issues like that weapons of war influence. But there are many things about war that don't change. For instance, like I said, there's always that propaganda that precedes war, and that want for action and bloodshed, and to get back at somebody after something happens because of an emotional attachment to what has happened, like 9/11, but not really knowing exactly who did it, or how, or what their organization is like, or if they're attached to a country and to what extent, but just wanting vengeance. So once that emotional attachment is achieved to a certain method, like going to war, then it's very hard to shake people's hearts and to say, okay, maybe there are other ways. Maybe we can send in a strike team and just focus on one person, or maybe we can just focus on an organization and not go to war with the whole country, for instance. But once that emotional attachment to war takes place in our hearts, and we allow it to, and the vast majority of people do after something like that happens, then it's almost a sure thing, because people's hearts have been turned, unfortunately. For instance, during World War I, when Archduke Ferdinand, I believe, was assassinated by a member of the Black Hand, and that's kind of what started World War I. People wanted the governments of the nations, of course, were committed to their treaties with one another, and the people were convinced that Well, we have to go to war now because this leader was assassinated, and this is our patriotic duty. And World War I was one of the most terrible wars in human history. Trench warfare. Oh my God. It's supposed to be the war to end all wars. World War I was, but of course it didn't. There's no war that ends all wars. It's almost ridiculous to think so. There's no war that that can happen in order for every other war to be prevented after that. War doesn't prevent war. The only war that will end all wars is if we have a nuclear apocalypse and everybody is destroyed. That's the only war to end all wars right there. And we do not want that to happen. As bad as the human race is, I think that we can make it. I think that we can become something much better than we are. And we deserve to be around. You know, I've had my problems with the human race, you can say. But I really believe that we can be something great. Something so great that we can't even contemplate it right now. But I believe that we can increase compassion in our hearts and love for not only the other human beings, but animals, plants, the universe. The desire for discovery can be increased in us once we stop focusing on the fear and the hatred and the conflict. That eventually we'll reach a point where we literally ascend from something closer to animals, like I feel like we are a lot of the time now, to something that would rather die than destroy another life. It's a difficult road to imagine where we're going, and I have many ideas about it, but war is not something that can end war. Conflict is not something that can end conflict. Only love can end war. As simple as that sounds, and some people might scoff and say, "Oh my God, I mean, what do you even mean by that?" But I mean that once we start to realize that to work with somebody and to make compromises, even if we feel like we're stronger, is favorable to the overall development of ourselves and every other human being. And it will actually end up better off in the long run than if we had just try and take whatever we want and run, or take as much as we want in a society. And this is on an individual basis. If we just take as much as we can without getting in trouble and not care about anybody else, if we actually give more, then there will be more for everyone. If we stop thinking on an individual level and think about everyone else before ourselves, and everybody else does that, everyone will be taken care of. Only love can allow this to happen, not war. There is no war in all wars. Conflict perpetuates conflict. Peace perpetuates peace. Love perpetuates love. I'd highly recommend this book. Let me get it to a point where you can actually see it. It's a book of sayings, you could say. It's not like a continuous story or anything like that. It's called The Art of Peace by Morihei Ueshiba. Probably butcher that name, but it has so many good quotes about peace. And let me read a couple. And some of them are very philosophical, and some of them are very practical. All of life is a circle, endlessly revolving, and that is the center point of the art of peace. The art of peace is a seamless, inexhaustible sphere that encompasses all things. You must be able to gauge the physical distance, the time distance, the psychological distance, and energy distance between you and those who oppose you. In the art of peace, we never attack. An attack is proof that one is out of control. Never run away from any kind of challenge, but do not try to suppress or control an opponent unnaturally. Let attackers come any way they like, and then blend with them. Never chase after opponents. Redirect each attack and get firmly behind it. Now, if you don't already know about this book, it's kind of a book about Aikido, which is a very non-violent martial art where you're just trying to not kill somebody. You're trying to incapacitate them, but not kill them. This particular book has many artwork calligraphy pieces. I was about to say artwork, but it's calligraphy. And it's very masterfully done. This is the one for hidden, the basic idea of hidden. This is the character for martial valor and courage. But I'd highly recommend this book, and I think it really goes with what I'm talking about right now. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'm glad that you made it this far if you have, and I will see you in the future.